All right, guys, starting to roll in here. Let's see. There we go. All right, guys. How's the audio? I've got a mic today. We're still outside. We're at the Cabana Bar today, though, but I've got a mic. So let's test the audio out. How's that sounding to you all? Good? Okay. Perfect. I'll let you guys roll in here. Everybody ready to see the total eclipse? We've got our special glasses here so we don't destroy our retinas. Checking out the total eclipse with Crack. We'll take some shots of us both and the rest of the people here checking out the eclipse. So make sure if you're looking at it, make sure you have proper eye protection so you don't destroy your eyesight for all of eternity. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and intro. So what we're going to be doing here, guys, is we're going to be joined shortly by Evan Silva on the phone. Evan's going to be helping break down some overachieving and underachieving teams this upcoming season. There's obviously most people have positive expectations about the season. Most people are a little bit more optimistic. Most teams are the same way, in fact. And so we're going to be discussing overachievers and underachievers. And I can see your questions now. We don't have somebody filming it right now, so it's a lot easier to respond to you. I'll make sure we touch on Green Bay because I think that division is the NFC North is pretty interesting. There's a couple teams that I like and a couple teams, well, there's one team in particular that I'm a little bit down on, but it's not Green Bay, and I'll go over that. And Evan will as well. He's going to be calling in. And then after Evan, we're going to be joined by Bill Krackomberger. He's going to come on over and have a seat next to me, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he does for the season in terms of NFL futures, early season, preseason football. How much is he caring about preseason? How much is he getting down on preseason, just in general? And what does he do during the NFL futures, win totals, and things like that? So Crack's going to be joining us as well. Somebody asked a question about the Jets. Can you repeat that question? I didn't catch it. Evan's calling in about 2 minutes here, so I could take a couple questions right now. Rams with McVay. Yeah, Cooper Kupp. Look, I think the Rams are an interesting team. I think you have to look at their schedule to see who they're playing. There's a couple games where the conception about the Rams is going to be bad, but the conception about some of the other teams is a little bit inflated. And I think they've got a number of spots on their schedule that I've already circled where I'll be looking to take them more weekly than I would season win total wise. I think there's a little bit more value. I'll save the fantasy specific questions like that for Evan. I think the Jets are obviously going to struggle, but everybody knows that. Everybody's already extremely down on the Jets. So the extra value that you might get in betting the Jets for the futures, probably there's not a lot of value left. It still might not be the worst bet, but there's not a lot of value there because everybody has the same opinion. Most of the time you're going to get value when you're going against opinion or you're preceding the line move, and the Jets have already been bet under tremendously. End of the year, I'd like to see Joe Mixon emerge. I really am down on Jeremy Hill, but he's their guy. He's their prime running back right now, and it's going to be hard for Mixon to steal enough carries, but I think that should be their future. It looks like a lot of the AFC East is kind of going to be in for down year, and that's the problem with the AFC East in general. We've had a lot of trouble with finding teams that are going to be competitive with the Patriots, and that's why the Patriots are shoo-ins for the playoffs year in and year out. And once you get into the playoffs, it's just a tournament, and they're going to have a lot of success. So, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I like that division to be a lot more competitive. Running back in New England, that's hard to say. I think it should be Gillislee. I think it should be Gillislee, but Burkhead's going to steal touches. It's really going to come down to who do they trust with the goal line role. I think both Burkhead and Gillislee should be good down there. It's a matter of who's more effective early to make up Bill's mind. Sorry, I missed that last question. Denver's defense. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Denver, they're going to have to rely on their defense yet again, and I think they're going to be. I mean, that defense is a sound unit, and they have pass rush and they have the secondary. So those are the two most important parts of a defense. So I think their defense is going to be solid. If they can get that young rookie running back to develop a little bit. All right, here's Evan right now. Evan.
What's up, Warren? How you doing, man?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. Probably not as good as you, man. Still at the beach?
Still at the beach, sitting in the cabana right now, outside of the pool. The audio sounds pretty good. Guys, can you hear Evan all right when he was talking there? We just want to make sure you're coming in good. We've got you on a Bluetooth speaker here. Yeah, everybody can hear you just fine. So,
cool.
Yeah, maybe next year we'll turn this a little bit. We'll do it at a different time so you can make it down here as well, because that would be fun. I'm sure you would like to make it if it was a different point in time. But yeah, so you obviously been studying the preseason. We brought Evan on obviously because he's got a ton of information. He's watching all these preseason games. I'm watching as many as I could, less traveling down here. And obviously Evan is very familiar with all of these teams, all these players, everything he does at Rotoworld. So just a reminder, I'll throw it out there at the top. You can follow Evan on Twitter at Evan Silva. You can follow me on Twitter at SharpFootball. Evan writes over at rotoworld.com, so you can get his stuff there. I'm over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. As you can see, Sharp Football Beach Week, and sharpfootballstats.com, which is the free stats website. So what we're going to do is go over a few teams with Evan, teams that he thinks might be underachieving or overachieving. So let's go ahead and start, Evan, with we'll dive into players as well. Once we get through some teams. But first and foremost, is there a team right now that you think is getting too much hype and too much press? You think they might not meet those expectations this season of what people, whether it's the Vegas total, the total for the over-under, or just the common consensus opinion on teams that are locks or teams that seem really good, those terrible buzzwords in the industry. But what's your take?
So I think the Lions still get a decent amount of respect, and their win total opened at 8 games even. It has been bet down to 7.5, and I still like the under at 7.5 with the Lions. Last year, the Lions went 9-7, and they were among the league's biggest overachieving teams. Their Pythagorean win expectation was only around 7.5 wins, so they outkicked that by nearly a game and a half. And it's pretty amazing when you look back and see what they did, that of the Lions' 9 wins last year, 8 of them occurred in games decided by one score. And last year's Lions played a very fragile style of football, especially on offense. Their defense fell apart early in the season, and they morphed into one of the slowest-paced teams in the NFL. They were trying to milk the clock to keep the defense off the field. This offseason, they lost their left tackle, Taylor Decker, and they lost their left defensive end, Kerry Hyder, who led the team in sacks last season. He was like a breakout player, and the Lions are really, really low on pass rushers right now. And they have a pretty mediocre offense. They have a really bad defense, and they have the 11th toughest schedule in the league, according to your strength of schedule projections on Rotoworld. So I think the Lions are like a 5 to 7 win team, and not a 7 to 9 win team. And I still like their under, even though it moved down from 8 games to 7.5.
Yeah, what's your take on Stafford this season? I mean, and I know everybody's big on Kenny Golladay, and I was big on him too because he wasn't even getting drafted. But I think he fills a role there. But do you think Stafford himself is going to have a better season than he did last year? or do you think that, which player on offense do you think is going to be better, and which players do you think are going to struggle and cause them to overall not achieve as well as people are thinking?
Well, I do like Stafford. He's like a late round quarterback in fantasy. You always benefit from he plays so many games indoors, but he doesn't have like upside compared to a lot of the quarterbacks ahead of him. Marcus Mariota, Kirk Cousins, those guys stand out as having a higher ceiling than Matthew Stafford this year, and that's why I have them a tier above Matthew Stafford. But they're going to be throwing the ball this year. In all of their years under Jim Caldwell, they finished top 11 in the NFL in pass attempts. But because he doesn't add a ton of value with his legs, and because their offense really isn't explosive, and I think that they are going to have to play slow again this year. Stafford for me is my quarterback 15 in fantasy. He's not a guy that I'm trying to go get in drafts. Sometimes I'll take him if he falls to the right spot, but not really someone that I'm bullish on. In this offense, I think Golden Tate is the guy to be bullish on. He usually goes 4th, 5th rounds in drafts. He has more value in PPR leagues just because of the style that he plays. But he could also see an uptick in red zone and scoring position usage now that Anquan Boldin is gone out of that offense. And, a lot of people have tied Anquan Boldin's departure to benefiting Eric Ebron, but it could just as easily help Golden Tate. Golden Tate is going to be playing that slot receiver role that Anquan Boldin got all those red zone targets in last season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I want to see what Jim Bob Cooter is going to do here because everybody is so big. I think, is Ebron one of like the biggest buy high candidates right now? Like everybody's talking about Ebron being this guy who's going to emerge because there's opportunity, and opportunity means a lot, especially at the tight end position. But I was shocked how little they targeted him last year in the red zone, and if he's not getting those targets, he was efficient for the most part when healthy, but he's got some injury issues. I don't know. I think I'm not completely selling him, but I'm maybe not as high on him as some of the other people are in the industry. The other thing about the Lions, I mean, of their 9 wins, 8 of them came by 1 score or less. Right. So they were playing a lot of close games. Now, they weren't 8-2 in these games and are going to have a lot of regression. They were 8-5, but the point is they're not really getting out and commanding leads. Their defense is problematic, and they're having trouble doing that. So it's just hard for a team like that to consistently produce enough wins if they can't get out to leads and be able to maintain them.
Yeah, and with Eric Ebron specifically, he's never been a touchdown scorer. I mean, you can go back and look at his college profile. He's never had more than 5 touchdowns in a season at the NFL level or at the college level. And you mentioned the injury concerns. I mean, he's essentially missed all of camp with a hamstring injury. So, I was a little bit higher on Eric Ebron before camp than I am now. I still think he's okay as a late-round tight end. But there are certainly reasons to be cautious and wary of relying on Eric Ebron as an every-week fantasy starter when, the guy has never, consistently stayed healthy, and he's been hurt essentially all of the game. Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, what about do you have another team, or you want to talk about a team that you think might be underachieving this year compared to what a lot of people are suggesting they'll do?
Well, I think that one undervalued team, actually, and one team that could exceed expectations is the 49ers. And I wrote in my 49ers team preview that I liked the over on the 49ers when their win total was still at 4.5. Their win total has since moved up to 5 games, and I still like the over. I think that this is a sneaky 6 to 7 win team. Their schedule isn't terribly difficult. It's middle of the road according to your strength of schedule projections. Last year, the Browns were talked about a lot for tanking, but the 49ers were also pretty clearly tanking. They went 1-5 in one-score games. and in the second half of games, they would take their pedal off the gas after after hot starts offensively, especially late in the year. That Jets game stands out, where they were at home and Carlos Hyde was dominating. The 49ers dominated that whole game, but somehow at the end they figured out a way to lose. And I think that late in the year they were just playing out the string. I think that they will be a mentally tougher team under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I think that their talent their talent base has been upgraded. This new regime brought in a bunch of new players, and I think that Brian Hoyer can give the 49ers confident enough quarterback play that they can be a 6, 7, maybe even 8-win team. But I see them more in the 6, 7-win range, and I like the over right now on 5 wins.
Yeah, the 49ers, obviously, they're only favored when they open the lines in one of their games. So if they are going to hit that level, they could be an interesting team to bet on. And I think, like you mentioned, throughout the course of the game, some of the times they would take their foot off the gas, they would fall apart. They were a very good first half team, all things being considered last year in terms of betting potential. And it'll be interesting to see if they continue that this upcoming season. We know Kyle Shanahan and the way that he started things in Atlanta with the just getting off the blocks quick and racking up a big lead as possible. And we'll see if they try to implement that out in San Francisco this year with a quick start. What fantasy guys do you really like for the 49ers? If you think they're going to be a little bit better than people think, is there a specific wide receiver or another player who you think might exceed expectations right now that the common conception is not as high as it should be?
Well, Carlos Hyde has been pretty much unchallenged in the 49ers backfield. And Kyle Shanahan, of course, has a long history of fielding successful running games. Now, Carlos Hyde did not look great in the 49ers' second preseason game. He was out there a good bit, and he missed some holes. And, he's got to, because one of the initial concerns that the 49ers expressed, and John Lynch, their GM, stated this publicly, was that they did not know whether Carlos Hyde was going to be a fit for their scheme. And then they brought in a bunch of running backs. They signed Tim Hightower. They traded for Capri Bibb. They traded up to draft Joe Williams. They brought in the undrafted rookie Matt Breida. So they made a lot of moves at running back, and Carlos Hyde is in a contract year, quite possibly not part of the 49ers' future. So there are reasons that Carlos Hyde goes in the 5th and 6th rounds of fantasy draft. And I understand the negative views against him, but to get a pretty clear-cut starting running back in a Kyle Shanahan running game on a team that I think could be better than people anticipate, I think is a great value. And I like to start wide receiver heavy early in drafts and end up with a bunch of middle round running backs, and Carlos Hyde is one of my most frequent targets.
Yeah, and the other thing too with Kyle Shanahan, he knows a lot about helping out his quarterbacks. And everywhere he's gone, they've been big on the run game, even if the teams haven't been great. And so I really do think that he's going to try his best not to game flow himself out of getting enough carries to the running back to help support his quarterback. He's not going to want to stick his quarterback out there on an island and just make him throw the ball all over the place in the third quarter, second quarter, if they're down by 13 points. I think, at the end of the game, obviously everybody has to go to do that, but there'll be a lot more opportunity for him to run the ball than some other coordinators probably would be. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. Another player that I like in the 49ers offense is Pierre Garçon. Brian Hoyer, he's at worst one of the best backups in the league, and probably at best like a top 25 starter. But he's good enough to get the ball to playmakers. And we saw that with DeAndre Hopkins in 2015 when DeAndre Hopkins had that monster first half of the season. Brian Hoyer was at quarterback for most of that year. Brian Hoyer is not like a franchise quarterback, but he is good enough to deliver the ball to a player like Pierre Garçon. He's one of the best route runners in the league and should be their very, very clear-cut number one receiver. And you know, I don't know if he's going to score a lot of touchdowns, but I do think he's going to get a lot of targets and catch a lot of passes. And so I do like Pierre Garçon as like a middle round receiver, 6th, 7th round.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Pierre. Is there any player, not on the 49ers or the Lions who we talked about before, just a player, obviously you study him, you're doing drafts all the time, any player being completely overvalued right now that you think maybe you didn't feel this way to start the offseason, but you do now based upon how high he's being drafted, or at least how much higher he's being drafted than what he should be at, in your opinion? Or if you don't have somebody that your opinion's changed to that, is there any player that you've had this belief for a while? Ideally, you'd be able to share somebody who everybody right now is still overdrafting and you think he's not going to hold up to that end of the bargain.
All the Colts right now are really, really scary. I mean, Frank, and it's, you know, it starts with Andrew Luck's uncertain availability, and it extends to the loss of Ryan Kelly, who isn't going to play until week 9. Maybe the Colts, definitely the Colts' best offensive lineman. He's out until week 9. We have seen, you know, throughout the years how losing a center can just completely torpedo an offense, especially a good center. You remember when the Browns lost Alex Mack that one year, and their offense just went in the complete gutter. You know, you think back a few years ago to when the Ravens lost their center and they were playing Gino Gradkowski, and their offense just fell apart. I don't like seeing a team losing their center, and then, you know, in addition to the uncertain availability of their difference-making quarterback. And Frank Gore, you have to worry about him losing touches to not only Robert Turbin, who outplayed him in scoring position last year, but also Marlon Mack, who just moves at a different speed than the rest of the Colts running backs, and is probably somebody that the Colts are going to need to get on the field this year just to have some sort of playmaking ability in their backfield. Dante Moncrief has been hurt for almost all of camp, battling a shoulder injury. He has dealt with shoulder injuries in the past. And T.Y. Hilton goes from a guy who you want to start every single week, and you're excited to start every week in fantasy football, to a guy that you don't even know if you really want to start him when Andrew Luck is out. And, of course, Jack Doyle, who was a player that I really liked earlier in the offseason, but his value is so contingent on the health of Andrew Luck. So the Colts right now are a team that I feel very hesitant in drafts, you know, picking anybody. And I think that those players need to fall, like, I mean, I understand being like, I'm still pretty bullish on T.Y. Hilton because I think Andrew Luck is going to be back early enough in the season to where T.Y. Hilton can still be an every week starter for you. But, you know, the rest of the Colts, I want to see those guys drop at least 2 rounds below their average draft positions before I consider them. And that's Moncrief, Frank Gore, and Jack Doyle.
Yeah, and you mentioned Robert Turbin. He actually had the same number of carries inside the 5 last year as did Frank Gore. They both had 10 carries inside the 5. Now you got Marlon Mack. And the thing about Mack is he's an explosive runner, as we've seen. And when you have players that are explosive runners, yes, you may have more chances inside those, you know, because you're just getting the ball down the field, but you could also have issues where you're handing the ball to a running back on the 40 and he's scoring touchdowns. And Frank Gore doesn't really do that so much anymore, but Mack would do that. And the more touchdowns the team scores, probably the less likelihood they're going to be running from the 1-yard line with Frank Gore, simply because they're scoring those touchdowns from further out with Mack. So there is that. There is that as well. And guys, if you're curious, I'm looking at this book here. This is my 2017 football preview. You can pick it up at Amazon.com. You can also find it on my website, sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can buy it in electronic version. So, I mean, I'm just flipping through here, looking at the schedules and all the information that Evan's talking about. You can find a lot of that stuff in here to help you guys out with your projections. If you haven't already picked it up, probably a lot of you have, but if you don't know about it, if you haven't gotten it, you definitely need to get it before the start of the season. Tell me a player that you think is completely undervalued right now. Somebody who, the exact opposite of the situation we were talking before about the Colts. who's not on enough people's radars, who should be. Maybe it has something to do with what they've been doing in the preseason and more opportunities they've gotten, or maybe it's somebody even being more overlooked than that.
So consistently plus EV strategy in fantasy football at both the season-long and DFS levels is finding undervalued players in high-scoring offenses. We should all remember that last year, this time of year, you could get LeGarrette Blount in the 8th through 10th rounds of your season-long draft, and to begin the season, his price was super depressed in DFS. He, of course, went to lead the NFL with 18 rushing TDs. And I don't think people realize this, but the Patriots lead the NFL in rushing TDs over the past 6 seasons. They live in scoring position, and they score touchdowns. And everybody, of course, knows about Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, and they're rightfully excited about Brandon Cooks. And Julian Edelman is always a great PPR play. But people tend to avoid the backfield due to a stigma. And that creates a buying opportunity. And we saw that hit really, really hard last year with LeGarrette Blount. My best fantasy teams last year had LeGarrette Blount on all of them. And so last year, the undervalued asset in New England was LeGarrette Blount. And I think that this year, the undervalued asset has a chance to be Rex Burkhead. Mike Gillislee has been out since the spring with a hamstring injury. And Gillislee's hamstring problems date pretty far back because he actually missed the entire 2014 season with the Dolphins with a hamstring tear. Rex Burkhead is way, way better in the passing game than Gillislee. Burkhead is actually bigger and more athletic than Gillislee. And Bill Belichick essentially handpicked Burkhead as a back that Pat specifically targeted in free agency. Burkhead was a feature back with the Tom Brady group in the Patriots' second preseason game. And I think at this point, his odds of opening the season as New England starter are just as strong, if not stronger, than Mike Gillislee. I mean, there are only a few weeks left until the season starts. Gillislee isn't getting those reps with Tom Brady. Rex Burkhead is. Even on high-scoring teams, people try to avoid running back committees in fantasy football. And another one that stands out is the committee in New Orleans, where Adrian Peterson usually lasts until the 6th and 7th rounds of drafts. Mark Ingram, who's been a top 10 fantasy back in back-to-back years and is the Saints' best all-purpose back, he usually goes in the 5th or 6th rounds. These guys are undervalued because of that running back by committee stigma, but these are actually precisely the spots where we want to invest when we're targeting middle-round running back picks in season-long leagues. Mark Ingram is going to be an all-purpose scorer for you, and Adrian Peterson has a chance to be this year's version of Blount in terms of touchdown scoring upside.
Excellent. No, I 100% agree. I mean, I think the running back in New England is going to have a ton of value. There's a slight lack of clarity, but with Gillislee's injury, I think it's making the picture a little bit more clear. With Belichick, a lot of stuff comes down to doing your job and him trusting you to be there. And, of course, you got guys like Gronkowski and Edelman that he's very familiar with, and he'll put back in there at any time because he's already built that comfort level with them, but they don't need the practice. But with guys that he's just brought into his system, I would think that it's very easy for somebody to leapfrog a guy who might have been viewed as the early guy, but now he's not getting reps. And so if Gillislee can get back there quickly, that's different. But Brady's obviously probably not going to play the 4th preseason game. So there's not many more opportunities for him to get these valuable preseason reps. It kind of sucks for him, but that's life in the NFL, injuries.
And one approach that you can take in drafts is just to take them both. I mean, this is a strategy that I've employed. I know Sigmund Bloom. He's one of the best fantasy analysts, but he's also one of the best players among fantasy analysts. And he does this frequently. Sigmund Bloom will pair up two guys in the same backfield. He knows that the backfield presents a lot of upside, so he's just going to lock up that backfield. I mean, I've been in drafts where Sig has drafted 3 Patriots running backs. I mean, and he'll come back and get Dion Lewis later in the draft. Rich Rebar, I've also seen do that, and I've done it myself. I did it recently. Grabbed Gillislee and Rex Burkhead at the 7-8 turn in a 14-team draft. We're going to start to see Gillislee slip a little bit and Rex Burkhead move up, but I still think that if you are willing to start aggressive at wide receiver and then you are aiming for ceiling picks at running back, pairing together those Patriots running back on the same team is definitely a sound strategy. And I think the same goes for the Saints. You would probably have to do it around the 5th, 6th turn with Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson. But Mark Ingram is going to be a top 10, top 15 guy with Adrian Peterson healthy. And then if Adrian Peterson is 32 years old, has missed a bunch of time in recent years, if he gets hurt, then, you have the Saints feature back. And the same goes for, that Patriot situation. So, I like to target these high upside situations that seem murky, because that leads to those players in those backfields being undervalued in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Guys, feel free right now to fire away a couple of questions for Evan, and then we're going to bring Crack back on. Let's not do like specific, give me the best out of these 5 guys or stuff like that. Try to make them a little bit more conceptual, because I don't want to be rehashing things that might only apply to you personally. Let's try to make things a little bit more. Okay, guy wants to know your opinion on Drew Brees and the Saints this year. I'm big on. Well, go ahead. I'll catch up if you say something. If you don't say something that I wanted to talk about with the Saints, but go ahead. What do you think about the Saints and Drew Brees?
Well, I really like how soft their pass defense schedule is. Scott Barrett, who I know you're going to have on the show tomorrow, I believe, he has noted that Willie Snead has one of the softest projected schedules for slot receivers this year, which of course makes sense because the Saints have a passing offense that is facing such a soft schedule. And I really like Ted Ginn, and I know that he was a guy you wrote a lot about in your season preview. I know you're high on him, and he's going to be inconsistent, but he also does have an outside chance to be consistent. We have never seen him in a situation like this. As you pointed out in the preview, we've never seen him playing with a great deep ball passer on a team where the defense is trash. He's always been on teams that had good defenses, and now he's going to be playing in one of the most lethal passing offenses in football, and he's quietly been pretty good in fantasy the past couple of years, even though he was dealing with much less efficient quarterback play. So I like the entirety of the Saints offense. I think they have a great offensive line. I think they've got, Drew Brees is still playing at a very high level. I think he maybe lost some arm strength, but it hasn't affected his performance. And so that is an offense that I really want to buy into this season.
All right, we're going to go for some rapid pace. I 100% agree. What I was going to talk about was Ted Ginn too, so you nailed it. He's never played on anything other than, at least in recent memory, a top 10 defense. So we've got a bunch of questions rolling in here, and you're not going to have much time if I'm going to plow through them all. So I might put you on the spot. If you want to pass one of these, just say pass, okay? Because some of them are a little bit more like thought-provoking and difficult. Give me your top. Doesn't have to be the best, but the top couple of offensive lines in the NFL for, I guess, pass protection. I'm not sure what the question was, but it was about offensive lines. What are a couple that you like in the NFL that are good offensive lines that you think are going to be some of the best this year?
Yeah, so just going off the top of my head, I really like the Titans' offensive line. I like the Saints' offensive line. Even though they lost Teron Armstead, they have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Last year, Teron Armstead only played 30% of their offensive snaps, and then they went out and used a first-round pick on Ryan Ramczyk. I think the Patriots' offensive line is respectable. It has been banged up a little bit in camp. I like the Redskins' offensive line from a pass protection standpoint. I think that they can be inconsistent with their run blocking. Same goes for the Packers. The Packers have a really good pass protecting offensive line, not quite as good in terms of run blocking. The Raiders, of course, stand out. The Eagles, if they can keep those guys healthy and off the suspended list, they should have a great offensive line. The Falcons have a great offensive line. So just off the top of my head, those are some offensive lines that I would consider to be a significant plus for the players that play in those offenses. And by the way, pretty soon, I think it will be next week, Ross Tucker on the Fantasy Feast will be doing his offensive line tiers. So you should check out that show. Ross Tucker, of course, former NFL offensive lineman, very, very plugged in with people around the league, knows who's good, So I'm excited to listen to his offensive line tiers and maybe try to argue with him a little bit, but he usually wins.
Yeah. When he's talking about offensive lines, I'm sure he's got some great opinions. So that's the Fantasy Feast podcast. You can find that on iTunes. So definitely subscribe to that. That's one with Ross and Evan. I've been on it before. My podcast is the Sharp Football Analysis Podcast, and Evan and I do that each week. So you guys want to be sure to check out that as well if you're subscribing to podcasts. One sentence on Ty Montgomery. He's obviously dealing with some injuries. Somebody said sickle cell trait. One sentence on Ty Montgomery.
Just got to push him down, has not stayed healthy, fumbled in the preseason opener. The other guys have not stepped forward to grab the job, but, if the season were to start today, I would expect there to be a committee, and so that makes Ty Montgomery a guy who has fallen during training camp.
All right, give me your favorite at the moment, even if he's not like the best one, just the one that you can remember right now. Favorite rookie running back to target?
I think. Okay, so we're looking at four guys. We're looking at McCaffrey, Cook, Fournette, and Mixon. Right now I have Cook rated the highest. I mean, he's the healthiest, and he's locked into the most secure role, and I think that Vikings offense is really underrated. That's another offense I think is very, very undervalued across the board, although Dalvin Cook, his ADP has been skyrocketing, but, for good reason.
Right. Perfect. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to bring Krack over, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of his futures in terms of how he approaches the preseason. We're going to let Evan go, unless, Evan, you want to listen to this, but otherwise you can just catch the Periscope. It's entirely up to you, unless you have a question you want to ask for Krack and you want to just stay on here. What do you want to do?
No, I would love to. I got to go do Rotoworld blurbs.
Let's go. Let you go do
I'll
blurbs.
Talk to you guys later.
All right, thanks for joining us. All right, guys.
All right, bye.
That was Evan Silva, and now he's done. So now we're going to be joined by Bill Krackomberger. Obviously, you guys, if you were with us yesterday for the podcast, you saw him talking about, a lot about his history, about some of the stuff that he's done in the past, what he's looking to do this upcoming season. Obviously, he's got a new website coming out, crackwins.com. And what we want to talk today, we're going to be recording some videos, and crackwins.com is going to be up very soon, and we're going to get those videos live so you can see those there. That'll be separate. What we want to do right now is just ask him. You guys can feel free to chime in with some questions too. We'll kind of see if there's anything interesting that you guys are sharing that he could talk about. He's probably not going to give away any secrets, guys. He's not going to tell you right now what you guys should be betting at the very moment. But I want to get conceptually, how do you approach the NFL offseason from a betting perspective? Obviously, we've had long training camps. They're still in training camp, but they've got their weekly preseason games. They put out the Vegas win totals. I think was South Point first up with them this year. They put those out later than usual. I think they came out with them in May of this year, and then obviously other guys come out with their win totals. So the only real options that we have right now, there's some futures out there, but the bigger ones are the win totals for the season and preseason weekly games. How do you approach, first let's talk about win totals. How do you approach betting on Vegas win totals?
First, don't mind me with the sunglasses on. I kind of feel like John Candy in the summer rental out here. It's like hot and bright lights on. But, well, as far as season win totals go, I bet them because I have the bankroll to bet them. But the average person, most people can't tie up that much money for that many months. And, it's funny because yes, we do have edges on win totals, absolutely, season wins. But what kind of an edge do I have? 5 to 7%, maybe 10%. Well, I'm going to tie up my money. If I have just a gaming bankroll, and I understand most people do, I'm not going to recommend people tie up their money for the whole season because I know my games have an edge of 3 to 5% per play, one play. Why would I tie up so much money on a season win total unless you just like to have action the whole season and you want to root for your team that you're betting over or under for the season on? But as far as limited bankrolls, which most people have, we're talking to people that just have so much money on the side just for gambling purposes, which I recommend. And again, I really don't consider what we do gambling, and believe it or not. Gambling is something that has negative expectation over the lifetime of it, and I don't think we have that. I know we don't have that. So I wouldn't recommend tying up money unless you have that big of a bankroll where you can bet $500 on a season win total, and it's not going to affect you. Betting 4 or 5 games, that $2,500 is not going to affect you. But if you're betting less than that per game, then yes, it is going to affect you because you should bet that per week on the games, and your percentage, your ROI, your return on investment will be much more. It'll be greater at the end of the season than it will tying up the money just for that one $500 bet on a season win total. And by the way, you really can't get down too much money on season win totals. The sports books really don't take what you think. People think automatically the sports books take tons of money on season win totals. They really don't. So I would recommend doing our weekly stuff, doing your NFL games, your NFL totals weekly, betting on some of the stuff that I do. And it's funny, I was sitting here listening, thinking, writing some notes down to myself. My services just aren't going to be college football. I'm going to be giving out specialty sports like WNBA, golf matchups, which these types of betting opportunities have a very high rate win percentage. So that's something else I didn't touch on it yesterday. I thought I'd be touching on it today. Even some NFL props on Sundays before the games. These have very high win percentages, much more than during the season our weekly games do. Then again, there's also the same thing. They're limited. You can't bet as much on a proposition bet over under yardage per player or a WNBA game than you could on a college football or even a pro football game. So that's some of the things I wanted to touch on too, to let the people home know. And the way I actually, me and my team of guys do, we look at games so differently than many people. Even these preseason games, very shocked how these preseason games have been going. We win preseason, absolutely, but we don't win at the rate we've been winning the first 2 weeks. It's ridiculous. So it is something, and I hope to even be giving some. Maybe we're going to have the site up later this week, and maybe I could throw in the last round of preseason, the last week or something. But the win percentage has been very, very good, and it's knowing about the management and the team strategies. We focus on a lot of in-depth reading and research, especially right up until the game time, knowing what the philosophies of the team and what they're planning to do. Not just the fluff you read, and not just the fluff you read in magazine, or I'm sorry, in your newspaper, or especially stuff like that's on ESPN.com, or in ESPN. Not that I'm doubting, putting them down, but you're going to only read stuff there that is not going to be so up to date and so informative like me and my team have, just like Warren and he does. So by having us in your corner more than, especially watching something on Fox or ESPN, and we're much more in tune than they are. Because we're bettors. They're guys that are prognosticators, but they're doing it from a different mental standpoint than we are. We make our living. I make my living betting sports. I have no other income. This is how I make my money.
And I will agree 100%. I was actually talking with, I think it was Evan, about something like this the other day, where a lot of these guys in the national media, when they end up having to cover a lot of different teams, and it's their job or their profession to just report on things, some of them, not the best, but a lot of them who are giving your information, they lose the grind that it takes. It's hard work finding new angles, finding out new information, reporting on all the most in-depth information. But when you're actually placing bets on games and you got money at stake on these games, you're going to ensure that you're working your ass off to make sure that information is right and that information is maybe not factored in already, so it's new information. So the amount of work that goes into researching games and then betting on them and sharing them with you guys, it vastly exceeds what most of the people, I think, come to expect. A lot of people think that it's not work to just bet on games, but the reality is it's more work than most any other broadcaster or journalist is doing out there, because we're staking money on it and your money on it as well.
Yeah, the broadcasters and journalists that are out there, I think of the old time even as like Jimmy the Greek. Like, imagine if I was around when Jimmy the Greek was out there. I mean, he looked great, flashy, his gold chains outside of his suit, and his mystique charm to him, and the way he talked, and but he didn't pick winners in the end. People were actually waiting to get his games to bet against him a lot, but there was only NFL Today or CBS Today, whatever it was. You think he was on? It was CBS, and they just waited for him to come on there. He was a character. He's a cartoon character. They loved having him on there, but really he didn't know anything. Just like the ESPN guys, they don't know anything. Not that they don't know anything. I'm being too harsh. They don't know what it takes to actually win. They're giving you a line. When they say a line, because there's lines all over ESPN, it's mainstream now. When they give you a game on ESPN, they're using one line, and they're not even they're not even more being analytical towards the line. They're just saying, okay, this is +6.5 or +7, and they're not even up to date. They don't know what the real Vegas line is. Sometimes it makes me laugh watching it, and they don't have that background. They have the background of being a pro player, a retired player now. They don't have the information at their hands that goes deep into the analysts and getting into the predictive models that we do. And I'll use us. Our stuff has been back tested, and our stuff is so much research goes into it, more than just looking at a line and saying, oh, okay, yeah, they played good the last couple weeks, so I like them. And that's exactly what you get with the people on TV. They don't go back into stuff. There's no model. There's no database. There's nothing that they go back into and get the information out of. They literally go by what the newspapers have in it and by what the previous results have said. This line should be. Well, that's wonderful, but the line is already in the line. Whatever they're talking about is already in the line. So it's a difference between a professional and a non-professional, and someone that's out there to talk to people, on TV.
All right, let's take a couple questions. One guy asked what you think of reverse line movement. We kind of touched on this a little bit yesterday, but
okay. So in other words, you're saying like it goes from one side to the other side?
Well, no. What most of these people are referring to by reverse line movement is generally the guys who mainly look at the bet percentage screens, what popular bet percentages are out there, various Sports Insights or other websites that show that, and then that the line is moving against that. So 70% of the people are betting the Patriots, but instead of being they were favored by -7, but the line is now -6.
Well, put it this way. I see some of these sites on the internet that actually say 71, and this is the sports betting sites. Yeah. They say 71% of people are betting the Patriots this week over whoever they're playing, the Jets. Well, if that was a winning formula, looking through what they're saying, the sportsbook would not be telling you that information. They're just telling you that this is the percentage of it, but it's not the real information that's going to make you any money. If it was, they wouldn't be telling you. It's just like going into a casino and going up to a blackjack table and getting one of the little strategy cards in the gift shop and then telling you how to play basic strategy. If that was a winning strategy, if that beat the casinos, it would not be there. So, those is that what you're talking about, the percentages that's on there? I don't believe in it.
And unfortunately, you know what?
I never talk about
it. The vast majority of people, I see so many people, it's more predominant in the DFS community, I've noticed, but there's a lot of people out there who don't have as much experience with sports betting, but they want to factor in the Vegas line. And we talked about the Vegas line and how it's not really from Vegas. Right. That's not the originators, but they want to factor in these lines into how they're deciding who to start or sit or which guys to pick up, because they want to know which teams are favored, so they think they might run the ball more. They want to know which teams are underdog, and they look for this reverse line movement. But the reality is, I know this and you know this, but it's good to share this with the people, that you're absolutely right. If those lines really were the secret strategy to unlock everything and understand what the Vegas sharps were on, they wouldn't be. The books actually tell these sites what their percentages are, so they wouldn't be telling them that if it was going to help people win. The reason why they're telling people that is because people value information, and the more information, they think that they're going to be smarter, and they think that they're going to be able to win more. The reality is the only way you're going to know this information about what the sharps are doing and what the sharp side are is to talk to guys like us and to find out what these guys really are doing and what we're doing on games, because that's the real information. The information is not for free on some publicly bet website.
And I'm glad it's out there, though. I'm glad the public watches those things and sees those percentages and wants to take advantage of that. They feel, because if it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't make a living betting sports. Not just that, but stuff like that. If it wasn't for these guys on TV, the boomers and stuff, giving out games and Swami picks and stuff, I love it. Thank God it's there. I never want to see it stop. Thank God. So, but yeah, I don't really pay attention to much TV. I don't even watch much TV at all. But especially the shows on ESPN and stuff. And I'm friends with some of those guys there. You know, one of my best friends in the world is Teddy Atlas. But I really don't watch a lot of the fluff when it comes to NFL, and especially I get very aggravated and irritated watching when they have their quote-unquote handicappers that are working for ESPN that are getting paid and saying what a sharp side of the game is, and when many of them don't even put any money up of their own anyway to bet. They're just, basically taking what they see off an internet forum or following something that someone like I'll post myself, and I'm going to be starting to post some little bit of stuff on Twitter. Not giving out games because I just don't want to do that. But as far as little secrets here and there, they see that stuff and they go. They're the ones that are on ESPN, by the way. They're the ones that are talking about the sharp sides of the games and stuff. It's what they visualize or see to think that they're the sharp side of the games, and it just aggravates me to no end to see that misinformation out there, because in the end, I do care about the public. I'm going to be writing for Gaming Today in Las Vegas. If you're ever out in Las Vegas this year, the sportsbooks have this free giveaway, Gaming Today, which I always love to read anyway on the plane on the way back or whatever. And I'm helping out the people for nothing there, giving them some strategies, betting tips, just not only betting tips, but just showing them about betting in general, the value of lines, the value of line shopping. So I have a little bit different of a internal skills like that too, and I still want to give back some stuff to people.
All right, guys. Any other last question, and then we'll close up this podcast. Periscope. The biggest thing that someone wants to do this for a living. I assume he means the biggest thing that somebody needs to perfect or figure out what to do if they want to bet on sports for a living. I guess is the question.
I bet on sports for a living is a tough thing. This is something you should do. I wouldn't recommend no one to bet on sports for a living. It's a great thing to do to make some extra money, though, for sure. But betting on sports for a living takes such intestinal fortitude, which I am way past that now. Not sweating games, not watching games. We were in the house last night. I bet on the preseason game, and they were trying to find the game, and it didn't even matter to me. It was on. I didn't even know the score until it came up in the background. I was doing some work. It's a tough thing to do. Bankroll management's number one. People just seem like they can't grasp that. I've helped people out, given them winners. I recently helped someone. I thought I was helping him. He was betting a couple $100 a game, and he won like 20 units. I gave him in WNBA. This is just someone I helped out playing online blackjack, and he didn't want no games no more. I told you when I came to town. It sickened me seeing something like that. So, but as far as being a professional bettor, I think that's really a tough thing to do for anybody, especially now. There's so many things you have to know. It's so hard to get down on games in Las Vegas. I've been thrown out of Treasure Island, Stations Casinos, William Hill. I mean, it's so hard for someone to come into town and start betting sports professionally and make a living and make sure you have money for your family and yourself. Especially if you have a family, your wife's never going to allow that. So.
Right. Exactly. So now there was a good question here, but it's going to be a tricky answer. This will be the last one that we'll take. Is there's a lot of people watching the show that are DFS guys that like to win money or try to win money playing in those tournaments. The question specifically relates to if they can't necessarily trust those odds screens for what's the sharp side of this game, but they still want to try to get that information, and they don't want to pay any money to join my service, your service, etc., how would they get that information?
What, the live odds? Like,
no, they want to know. They want to know what the sharp side is on games.
Impossible.
Right.
It's impossible because, like I said yesterday, I can manipulate so many games with literally $2,000. I can manipulate a game to move a full point everywhere in the world, everywhere. So I'm not the only guy out there that's sharp like this. So to look at a Don Best screen or a sports option screen, or even look at your screen in the sports book, it's absolutely impossible to know which side. There is so much line manipulation, especially earlier in the week. There is so much misconception and reading into things. It's really, really tough. If I was to follow anybody, though, I've always said this, I would follow someone like Pinnacle's lines. They're a very tight, low-margin line, so you can follow that line to see, which side of the game that they want at game time. That's about the best thing I can give out. But you're not going to just win based on that alone. Right,
and the other thing for the DFS guys, a lot of these guys are trying to set their lineups over the course of the week. And a lot of the podcasts that come out that are DFS-oriented will come out on Wednesday and on Thursday. Well, the reality is, like Krack was saying, these lines can be manipulated a ton. And I think the screen has gotten less helpful over the years. More people are aware of that fact, and it's even more distracting at times to try to look at the screen and see the key moves pop up. If you don't really know the information, you don't know why this game is moving or who's actually betting it, which group, you don't know what their purpose is. So even if you're very experienced and have been studying the screen for years and you know what the bet percentages are and you see a line moving, unless you know who's responsible for moving that line, you really don't know if that's the sharp side or not. And especially early in the week, Wednesday, Thursday, trying to figure this stuff out. So in some cases, like, we'll know the information. We'll know that this is a sharp side, or this is a side that we're going to be on, but we don't like the number yet. We're going to wait till it gets better, or we're going to get out in front of it. But people trying to tell you that they know what the sharp side is, who are just looking at the odd screen, or not even an odd screen, just looking at a website that has what the line is at open, what the line is now, and the bet percentages. You can't necessarily believe that that's going to help you every single time, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely not.
Okay,
absolutely not.
All right, guys. Well, that's it from out here for today. Again, you can follow Krack on Twitter at Bill Krackman. You can follow me on Twitter at Sharp Football, and we'll be back with you tomorrow at 12:30. Enjoy the eclipse. Keep your eyes closed unless you got glasses, and we'll see you tomorrow.